Well, hello, this is Vincent Green, and we're going to continue our study in Genesis chapter 12. We're in this section of the early parts of the story of Abram. The Toledot section starts in chapter 11, verse 27, goes till chapter 25, and we've completed the introductory section that started at the same place and went to chapter 12, verse 9. And now we're in the first major narrative after the opening introduction to the larger section that starts at verse 10 and going till the end of the chapter. And so that's where we're at. Let me read these verses to you, and then we'll dig into them and pick up where we left off last time because we've already started looking at this section. Starting at chapter 12, verse 10. At that time, a severe famine struck the land of Canaan, forcing Abram to go down to Egypt, where he lived as a foreigner. As he was approaching the border of Egypt, Abram said to his wife Sarai, "Look, you are very beautiful. You are a very beautiful woman. When the Egyptians see you, they will say, 'This is his wife. Let's kill him. Then we can have her. So please tell them you are my sister. Then they will spare my life and treat me well because of their interest in you.'" Sure enough, when Abram arrived in Egypt, everyone noticed Sarai's beauty. When the palace officials saw her, they sang her praises to Pharaoh, their king, and Sarai was taken into his palace. Then Pharaoh gave Abram many gifts because of her: sheep, goats, cattle, male and female donkeys, male and female servants, and camels. But the Lord sent terrible plagues upon Pharaoh and his household because of Sarai, Abram's wife. So Pharaoh summoned Abram and accused him sharply. "What have you done to me?" he demanded. "Why didn't you tell me she was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister and allow me to take her as my wife? Now then, here is your wife. Take her and get out of here." Pharaoh ordered some of his men to escort them, and he sent Abram out of the country along with his wife and all his possessions. This passage picks up after the events of chapter 12, verse 1 to 9. Really, Abram's leaving of Ur of the Chaldees, going into Haran, and then leaving Haran, and now going into the promised land. This narrative builds from that. It flows from that. By the time you get to verse 10, they are in the land of Canaan. That's where they're at. And as I discussed last time in our last session, a severe famine arose. They're in the Negev. By the time verse 10 comes along, by the time we get to verse 10, they're in the Negev. That's the southernmost part of Israel, of that land, and it's a wilderness. It's a desert area, and he was most likely going around there. It says traveling south by stages towards the Negev, and that's where he resided. And based on from what we can gather, wherever he would go, he would build an altar and worship the Lord and make a testimony to the Lord, and that's great. That's wonderful. It's a praise to the Lord that he's doing that. But a severe famine comes along, that which is out of his control, that which is now going to affect him in many different ways at a physical level, emotional level, and a spiritual level, and he's going to have to make decisions on what he's going to do and how he's going to respond to all of this. And what it says is the severe famine, it struck that land, and you know who brought that famine, right? I mean, it's clearly God. But the severe famine, it says, forcing Abram to go down to Egypt, where he lived as a foreigner. And I discussed this last time, that what happens is that Abram makes a choice. of what he's going to do. God has revealed himself to him twice at this point, based on the passage prior to all of this. Chapter 12, verse 1 to 3 was the first occurrence that happened before the Ur of the Chaldees, and all those promises are the different elements to that great promise that God had made to Abram. And then he shows up again. God appears again and says, I will give this land to your descendants. But Abram, when the severe famine hits that land, what does he do? He decides to leave and go to Egypt. Egypt's not part of the promise. Egypt is another country. It's a foreign country, and it says at the end of verse 10, he lives there like he is a foreigner. And what this passage introduces to us, starting at verse 10, going to the end of this chapter, is, if you want to contrast it, Abram shows great faith in God, but now he's showing weak faith, or literally the absence of it. You either have faith or you don't. You're either showing it or you are not. And what you see in the life of Abram is you see the opposite. In verse 4 through 9, we saw the act of faith and what it looks like, what it manifests itself as. Now we see the manifestation, the display of weak faith and what it looks like and how it manifests itself, how it appears. And we looked at in verse 10, when he says he went to Egypt and chose to go down there, he's trying to go down there. If you asked him, why are you going to Egypt? Well, I need food, I need water, I need the stuff that would help me to survive, and my family and the people that are working for me, and Lot and his family and all the herds and all the cattle. And I got to take care of all this. I got to manage all of this. And so what does he do? Does he go to God? Does he reach out to God? Does he talk to God about this? Does he go to the Lord in prayer? No, he makes a decision on his own to go down into Egypt. And he's the leader of the group. Maybe he's fearing what his wife is thinking. Maybe he's fearing what Lot is thinking. Maybe he's fearing that some of the workers are going to jump ship and go back to Haran or go somewhere else and try to, and that's going to drain the talent pool that he has of workers to take care of all of the animals. Maybe he's worried about the animals. Some of them are going to die. And I mean, he's met with a dilemma that was out of his control. But it wasn't out of the control of God. It's in the full control of God. And how is Abram going to respond? Well, that's what we see here. He, rather than going to God, decides, number one, to seek the care of the world. To seek the resources of the world, to seek the attention of the world, the help of the world. That's what it meant for him to go to Egypt. If he would have decided to go back to Haran or go back to Ur of the Chaldees, it would have been the same problem. I honestly think that the reason it's Egypt is because it's closer. And I think too, that he is maybe I'm reading between the lines here, but he's thinking he'll come back to the land of promise. It's not like he thinks I'm going to leave here forever, but he's willing to go to Egypt, at least during the time of the famine. He's caught in the middle of a bad situation. When you look at it from a human perspective, nobody wants to be in a famine. Yeah, I get that. But the whole purpose of what this is supposed to do for him is give him another way of showing what does it mean to live for God. But rather than showing faith at this point, he shows the absence of it, what the Bible would call weak faith or lack of faith, He's not trusting in God. He's trusting in Egypt right now. That's a manifestation of weak faith. But our focus today is verse 11 to verse 13, because there's the second expression here that I want to deal with. And I kind of introduced it at the end of the last session, but I want to work through these 3 verses. It's very, very intriguing what you find here. Verse 11. So they leave Negev, pull up stakes, pack everything up, and they're heading down to the land of Egypt. And it says, as he was approaching the border of Egypt. So they haven't got there yet. They are closer to it. They're definitely walking that direction. They're definitely heading to that place. Abram has a thought. An idea pops into his head. This would not be the only time this would happen, or something like this. And even I think it takes place with Isaac as well. But they're approaching the land, approaching the border of Egypt, and Abram says to his wife, Sarai, here's his statement. Look, behold, you are a very beautiful woman. Hey, he's giving her a compliment. That's a good thing, right? But that's not the point of it. He's going to draw a conclusion based on that compliment. Here's what's going to happen. This is what I perceive. My brain's been working. And there's a hypothetical situation that could take place, most likely would take place, and Abram may not be far off from reality here, okay? It's not like this is a wild idea that has no basis in reality. He knows what living in a sinful world is like. He knows what people think, and he knows that they are now living there as a foreigner. They're the outsider going into this country that they probably have never visited before, I would imagine. And he says, here's what's going to play out. You're a very beautiful woman. And so when the Egyptians see you, because they're going to observe that we're not like them. We don't dress like them. We don't talk like them. They're going to know that. And here's what they're going to do. They're going to put 2 and 2 together, and they're going to realize that you're my wife. And so they're going to, because of their sinful desires, because of the propensity of the human heart to want something, to crave something. Remember, it would be Exodus 20 when the 10 Commandments would be laid out. But those commandments were a description. You want to know why it says, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not, or you shall not. You want to know why those commands are there, why God gives those commands? Because that's the way the human heart wanted to go. That was the pattern of the human heart, living in sin. And so God says, no, because he's confronting the sin in the human heart. So Abram would agree to all of that. He said, yeah, that's exactly how people are. I've observed people. I know people. I mean, you live in a sinful world. You get the idea of what the patterns are of how people express themselves and what happens. He said, they're going to see that you are my wife. They're going to see you're very beautiful, and what they're going to do is they're going to get rid of me. Let's kill him so that we can have her. So we got to come up with a way so that I can remain alive through this whole thing. So you got to tell them you're my sister. And if you do that, they won't kill me. They will spare my life, treat me well because of their interest in you. Now, the rest of this story develops that whole premise. But I want to break this down because you need to see what's happening here. You can read the words on the page, but what's going on? Why? You have to ask the question, what's going on in Abram's brain and heart for him to make a statement like this, even if it's all true? like I said, the hypothetical may be more closer to reality. Again, they have not reached Egypt yet. This conversation takes place before they get there. But what's going on? Well, what Abram does is he shows us not only that he's seeking out the cares of the world, he's seeking out security in this world, that this world is going to provide help for him in the time of crisis. And that's the wrong way to go. But he's also filled with something else. He's also got something else in his heart, and that is fear. Fear. Debilitating fear. We're not talking about the fear of God here. No, this is the fear of man. There's two different types of fear. Fear of God is one thing. Fear of man is another. And Abram is fearful of man. And when you take your eyes off of God, you become more fearful of man and what man can do. This is why many people fear death. They fear it. Why? Because they have no way to understand it. People who live in sin all their life, who never bow their knee to the Savior, who have no peace of heart, who have no justification, who have no salvation. Those who are lost and lost as can be have no comfort, they have no peace, they have no security, they have no assurance. And so when death comes knocking on their door, and one day it will, and one day it may knock on their door when they least expect it, they're going to be fearful. They're going to have no peace, no security, no happiness, no joy. They live in debilitating fear. Worry, anxiety, those are other terms that describe this. You may think to yourself, or you worry about things and, oh, I worry about this, I worry about that, I worry about this, I worry about that. And am I the only one that's like this? No, it's been going on for many years. Jesus will tell us in Matthew 6 not to worry about anything. Paul will reiterate that and say that again in the book of Philippians chapter 4. Can't worry about anything. Don't worry about anything. Don't worry about anything. But you know what you do? You pray about everything. Abram's not doing much praying here. He is speaking out of fear that is in his heart. There's a passage, before we look at the details of verse 11 to 13, there's a passage where Paul tells Timothy, it's in 2 Timothy chapter 1, just listen to these words. He says, Timothy, I thank God for you. Timothy is left in the city of Ephesus. His job, his task, his ministry is to ordain elders and find and establish the church and make sure the church is following the Lord and teach sound doctrine. And he's young, okay? And if you go back to 1 Timothy, you'll find that it really bothered him. I mean, he worried about things. He worried about doing the ministry correctly and it got so bad it affected him at a physical level, and Paul would say, take a little wine for your stomach's sake, you know. It's the old King James rendering of that. But he would say, take some, help yourself out, and calm it down. Well, he picks up on the same theme, but in a different way here. He says, Timothy, I thank God for you, the God I serve with a clear conscience, just as my ancestors did. Night and day, I constantly remember you in my prayers. I long to see you again, for I remember your tears as we parted, and I will be filled with joy when we are together again. He says, I remember your genuine faith. You share the faith, for you share the faith that first filled your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice. And I know that same faith continues strong in you. So he's talking about having strong faith. So this is why I remind you to fan into flames. Keep the fire burning of the spiritual gift God gave you when I laid my hands on you. For God has not given us a spirit of fear and timidity. That is the fear of man. What God has given, rather, is a spirit of power, love, and self-discipline. So never be ashamed to tell others about the Lord. Don't be ashamed of me either, even though I'm in prison for him. With the strength God gives you, you be ready to suffer with me for the sake of the good news. Because God has saved us. And he goes on to talk about the gospel. The point that he's making to Timothy is, listen, you got a ministry to do. You got a calling on your life. Yes, it's not easy. Yes, it's difficult. Yes, it's severe. Yes, it's going to be trouble. Yes, you're going to have attacks and you're going to have those. I'm living proof of that, Timothy, as you well know. I mean, I'm in prison because of my faith in Christ. I'm in prison because of the ministry he has placed before me. But you're there, you're ministering. God did not give you a spirit of fear. So if you're acting in fear or in timidity, you're acting outside the will of God. That's his point. So Abram here, when he makes this statement to his wife Sarai, she never says anything back. She never says yes or no. She, as we will see, looks like she does go along with the idea, but it's just Abram talking here. But what he's doing is he's speaking out of fear. So what you see here is, how does a fearful heart think? What does a fearful heart look like? Well, let me give you a picture of it. He says in verse 11, okay, they're approaching the border of Egypt. He says, look, you're a very beautiful woman. First thing he sees is a difficult situation. We are going into a foreign country. We're going to live in the land of Egypt. We don't know how long. It's a foreign country, but sinners are sinners. People are people. And if I size it up correctly, we have a difficult situation. So it starts with a difficult situation. Famine is one thing, but her beauty is another. When he says to her, you are a very beautiful woman, even though it sounds like a compliment, it's not really meant to be a compliment. Not at this point, at least, because what he's doing is he's expressing the difficult situation. In his mind, her being beautiful is a difficult situation for the moment at hand, for the time at hand. It's not what he was hoping for. You say, well, wait. Doesn't he want her to be beautiful? Yes. But it's going to cause a problem in his mind. This is where it starts. Why do you fear? Because you fear the difficult situation. But then it gets more personal. Notice what he says here. Okay, you're very beautiful. So the Egyptians are going to see you. They're going to want you. They're going to want you in a very physical way. And they're going to assess the situation. They're going to put two and two together. And they're going to see that you are my wife. That we are knit together as husband and wife. But their lust for you, the physical attraction that they're going to have for you, or because of you, the physical attraction they're going to have to you, it's going to cause them to do something drastic, and that's what I really fear. What is that? They're going to kill me. Do you see where this is going? The difficult situation that he brings up because of the beauty in contrast or in connection to the sinful people of the land of Egypt and where people's thoughts go and how sinful hearts are. And he's connecting two things that are going to blow up. Her beauty with the sin of the men of the Egyptians. It's going to lead to his death. That's what he fears. And maybe he's thinking this way where, hey, listen, Sarai, if I die, how can we have a child? How can the promises of God be met? Maybe he's thinking it that way. But at the essence of it, the issue is he sees that he's going to die, that they will kill him. Violent death, probably stab him or slit off his throat, cut off his head. And he probably has every imaginable way in which they would do this. Because they need to get rid of him so that they can have her. That's how the logic is moving here. That's how the logic is going in his brain. And you can imagine, I mean, when you get fearful, you start to imagine any kind of scenario. Any kind of scenario. So here's what we need to do. We got to tell them that you're my sister. Verse 13. Please tell them you're my sister. He said, please. It's like he's begging and, be willing to do this. Be willing to do this. And what was he doing? Is she his sister? Well, if you go to Genesis chapter 20, verse 12, and he'll state this later because it happens again. He says, she really is my sister. We both have the same father, but we have different mothers. And I married her. So technically speaking, he's thinking we can make this work. What he's doing is stretching the truth. You see, he's got to make it palatable in his mind. He's got to make it so that he doesn't feel like he's sinning against God, even though he knows what he's doing is wrong. He knows what he's thinking is wrong. He knows he's really lying and making, it's the whole thing. Well, I'll cross my fingers and, I'll cross my fingers and hope that, this will be okay. And I'm not really trying to speak lies and I'm not really trying to be evil here. I'm speaking. But see, this is what happens when you speak out of fear. When you speak out of fear, you embellish the difficult situation that you've created for yourself. You at least imagine it. You fashion it. You create it. You analyze it. And did God say that this could happen? No. All of this is coming from himself, and he's caricaturing the hypothetical situation. He's creating drama for himself that may never happen. And then it may. But it doesn't matter. It's that whatever the scenario is that he's creating and fashioning, no matter how hypothetical or real it may be, or could be, it's debilitating him. And it's not where the Lord would have him to go. The Lord doesn't want him thinking like this. The Lord wants him focused on him and his promises and the land and what God is doing in his life. He wants him to be focused on his words and his truth, not being fearful over something that could or could not happen. And if it does, how can you stop it? You see, Abram's trying to control a situation that is uncontrollable. They could possibly murder me. We have to control this. You know what feeds fear? You know what feeds it? Is the desire to control. You're trying to control a situation, and when you try to control a situation, when you're going to control it, it's all about you. You're less dependent on God, or even you're not dependent on God. That's how it all works. That's how it all flows out. And so here is Abram trying to control the situation. He thinks he's going to get murdered because of it. And they're going to kill him, and they're going to have her. It's going to be bad for her. It's just going to be a mess. And he's playing out all this drama and all these fears, and he's rolling them through his head, and he's articulating his fears to his wife. And he says, just please tell them you're my sister. That will solve the problem. I got it all figured out. I defined the problem. I solved the problem because I'm controlling every end of it. I control the design of the problem. I control the mechanism to solve it. And I control it all. And all you got to do, just agree with me. See what I'm seeing. Feel what I'm feeling. I want you to be as fearful. I want you to be in a desperate situation. He's speaking out of fear. What you're seeing is an illustration of how fear works in the heart to debilitate it. This is not showing faith in God. He's intimidated by every Egyptian. He's going to walk around with looking behind his shoulder to make sure nobody's going to come and stab him literally in the back. Okay, so he's got this fear, and it's so controlling, and it's so going through his head and his brain and his heart, and it's so debilitating. But he says, if you would just do what I tell you, this will solve all the issues. I got it all mapped out. I can see it. I can see the beginning to the end of this thing, and I know how it's going to go. I can tell you how it's going to play out. And here's what they will do. They will spare my life, and they will treat me well. It'll all end for me very well. I'll keep my head on my body. And that's all I care about right now is keeping my head on the body. I want to stay alive. I want to stay physically alive. I need to stay physically alive because I need to be there for God. You know, you can see how this plays out, and he's speaking selfishly. He's speaking out of fear, speaking out of emotions that have been charged up by fear, charged up by anxiety, charged up by worry, and he's created a caricature of all this and created the problem, solved the problem, and he's got it all mapped out. He thinks he knows. He can script it for you. I can script it for you, he says, under his breath. They will spare my life. They will treat me well because since they are interested in you, and they think that I'm your brother, if they like you, they'll like me. That's what they'll do. If they like you, they'll like me. That's what they'll do. Well, I got to be here. Or some kind of bug. These houses have bugs. That's what they'll say. That's what they'll say. But you know what the reality is? Abram hasn't thought about it too much. He has thought about the fear and the anxiety and the worry. But you know what he hasn't thought about? Is that God's omniscient. And maybe he's forgetting something. Here's what he's forgetting. You know what the implication of all this is? Of all this fear? And where it leads? Here's where it leads. It leads to exposing his wife to the Egyptians in regards to their sin. They follow this path. And you know what happens? They may just take her. Yeah, they may spare Abram's life. But it opens up the potential for Sarai to be sinned against. That's what it opens up to. For Abram's wife, Sarai, to be violated, he's exposing her to potential harm. He's thinking more of himself and trying to avert harm that could come towards him, but he's forgetting about her. He's not being protective. He's not guarding her. She's his wife. And so what happens? What comes next? You know what this fear is? You know what fear, you know why people do fear, have anxiety and worry? Because you know why? Because they have pride. Fear and anxiety and worry is an expression of pride, because fear comes out of trying to seek control. And when you try to seek control, when you're trying to control everything, that's pride. That's another form of pride. That's what it is. Because you feel as though you can control everything. It's all about you, and nobody can change it. Nobody can modify it. Nobody can answer back. It's all about you. And that's what you're seeing here. It's like I got this bee or a bug flying around in this room. Don't know what it's going to do. It could land on me for some reason. But here I am. Am I going to fear it? I can't. I don't want it to land on me. But it's here. Now, before I probably make the next video, I can get rid of the bug. But you see, you have to live your life trusting in the Lord and stay faithful. This is the corrective, and it's not easy. Abraham's a real guy. And how many times have you feared and had worry and anxiety? I know I have. I can script that for you. I've had fear and anxiety. I mean, you worry about things. This is an expression of weak faith. But there's one more element to go. One more aspect of this that shows up, and that's what we'll look at next time, verses 14 to 16, as the story continues. And we'll look at how Abram enjoyed the pleasures of the flesh. What actually happens when he actually gets to Egypt under this new scenario that he's now created for Sarai to follow? What actually happens? Well, we're going to see that. Let's pray. Dear God, we do thank you again for this day and for your truth and for how you operate in this world. Lord, you are sovereign and you are Lord, and you control everything. Nothing takes you by surprise. It may take us by surprise. I didn't think there would even be a bug in this room where I'm filming right now. But Lord, you control it. Lord, you are sovereign, you are Lord, you are God. And you want us to learn to trust you more and more, and trust only in you, and depend solely upon you, because you are mighty, you are all powerful, all sufficient. Lord, living in the center of your will provides that security that we need. Lord, may you receive all the glory and all the praise. We give you thanks in Jesus' name. Amen. So next time we're going to pick up, look at verse 14, 15, and verse 16. And so we'll look at that, and hopefully there's no bugs next time. But it didn't land on me. That's pretty good. And so, but anyway, take care. Let God's blessings be upon you. Tell others about the series. Tell others about the YouTube channel. Encourage them to subscribe to the channel so that they would know, and maybe you can subscribe if you haven't. Hit the subscribe button and the like button or the thumbs up button or whatever it is, or the all button, and you'll get notified as new videos are uploaded. So I'm uploading videos all the time. And as I'm working through Genesis, I'm also working through other books of the Bible. And so you can look at the different playlists on the channel, and that'll update you with what I'm posting at any given day. So anyway, take care. God's blessings be upon you. We'll see you next time.